assistance bill. So I will move that House File 1019 be referred to taxes. And Representative Marquart, Chair Marquart, you want to explain your bill?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and members. I mean, one of the main goals of the Taxes Committee this year is to provide more accountability and transparency to taxpayers. And so what House File 1019 does is sets up a process to bring tax expenditures into the budget process. So what is a tax expenditure? It's kind of spending in the tax code, if you want. So if you just wanted to raise revenue in the tax committee, you would just have a broad base and you'd set a rate. But if you want to encourage home ownership, you do a mortgage interest deduction. If you want to make it easier for people to have childcare, you have a childcare credit. We exempt sales taxes off of clothing for competitive reasons. So it's those type of things, and it's no small amount. There's about 312 total tax expenditures, and if you add them all up, it comes to about $15.5 billion a year. And once it gets into the tax code, there is no line item in the budget. There is no regular review process. Many of these go on autopilot and just increase over time. And so what this would do is establish a Tax Expenditure Review Commission that would be composed of 9 members. 4 members of the Senate, actual members, 2 from majority, 2 from minority, 4 members of the House, 2 majority, 2 minority, and then a designee of the Department of Revenue. It would be staffed by the Legislative Budget Office that they would say would take about 6 staff. They would provide the professional staffing, and then there would be also work through the Department of Revenue that would help provide some data for this. And so what the commission would do is initially in the first 3 years would look at all 312 tax expenditures and basically set up a purpose statement and how we could measure it. And then after that, they would look at all or most, and not all of them would come under it if it isn't a huge cost or if it's tied to the federal laws and so forth. But over 10 years, then they would look at them on a rotating basis, and they would provide recommendations that would go to the tax committees of the Senate and House, and then the Senate and House Tax Committee would have to have a public hearing. So unlike some of the other tax expenditure bills that have come through, while this Tax Expenditure Review Commission could offer recommendations, it doesn't set up, okay, here's 10 tax expenditures, and unless the legislature acts, they go away. That is not in the bill, and that's been in some past ones. This would only make recommendations, and the legislature would have to go from there. So members, the cost is about, well, I think 950 million because just 1 year in the first year, and then 1.84 million. Basically, it's about $950,000 a year of costs for staff of the Legislative Budget Office and the Department of Revenue, and then operational costs. And then I think there's about $8,000 in costs that would go to members for travel and so forth. So members, it also changes timing on a couple reports. And then one last thing is that any new tax expenditure would have to have an expiration date of 8 years attached to it. So it would come back for review and so forth. So members, that is the bill, and I will take questions.
And Representative Marquart, I got a couple of questions here, but from people, but I got one first. The cost in this bill is going to be carried not by our committee, but by the tax committee. Just want to make that up, make sure that's on the record.
Mr. Chair and members, yes, that would be carried by the tax committee. I'm sorry I didn't mention that.
Thank you, Representative Marquart. Representative Nash, you were the first question.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And Representative Marquart, I like the idea of shining a light on expenditures in the tax code. But I guess my one reservation is that it is just a suggestion or hey, we should look at this. I would love if we could bolt in a sunset commission like effort with this, because while you say that provisions would have to sunset after 8 years, I guess I would like to know a little bit more about that, but I'm concerned that it would be an expense that would get incurred by the state, but it would only result in strong and friendly recommendations to our colleagues who could then, as they so often do, soundly ignore them and move on their own merry way. And I'm just wondering, what have you accounted for, and how have you provisioned this in such a way that it's not going to be a, gosh, guys, we should get rid of this expenditure, and then they all shake their head at you and pat you on the head and walk out of the room?
Representative Marquart.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Nash, that's a great question. And, you know, in the past, sometimes they've done that where they've actually put a certain number out. This has been proposals. And then kind of like the base closure, you know, just if you don't do anything, they automatically eliminate themselves. So, and also only the new, just for clarification, only the new tax expenditures coming forward would have an expiration date of 8 years. All these other ones that would be reviewed that are existing would be, as you mentioned, a review. But while this doesn't go that far, this bill, this I think takes a real major step in the right direction, is that right now it's not part of the budget process at all. Nothing is happening to bring these 312 tax expenditures to light. This will at least provide a thorough, in-depth. I mean, if you know, when you look at some of the things that will be looked at, you know, tax incident, what if you eliminated that? What would be a revenue neutral, you know, tax rate that you could lower things to, looking at purposes. So it looks at the efficiencies of these tax expenditures. So I think what it would do, Representative Nash, is give the legislature some really good information that they could look at to then base some decisions. And until we kind of even start doing that, there never will be, you know, a potential review where they look at back and forth. But I just, in this bill, I didn't want to go to the point where we put them out there and the legislature has to take a positive vote. I mean, we know some years we don't even get a tax bill. So what if there's a number of them there and we don't even get a tax bill that we can agree on? So I certainly see what you're saying, but I think this is a good first step in really putting this out in the light.
Representative Nash, follow up.
Yeah, just very briefly. Well, Representative Marquardt, I again appreciate the idea, but as somebody who has tried a number of times to remove provisions and only once successfully, it's rather Herculean, and I would love to see a bill that, one, doesn't cost as much, but two, actually puts some teeth into the removal of these things that are beyond a friendly suggestion. Again, appreciate the idea of letting taxpayers and legislators know what's being spent in the tax code, but I just think that it comes up a little short in the delivery. It's heavy on message and short on delivery, I guess, and I would love to see it higher on the delivery scale, because I think putting a sunset on some of these things would be very respectful to the taxpayer's wallet. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Greenman. Representative Greenman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Representative Marquardt. And just, I think, to follow up a bit where you started, what I heard you say was we're currently, and as someone who's new to the legislature, we're currently spending billions on tax expenditures. And can you talk a little bit about what our current process is to evaluate that? Like, how would we currently in the legislature evaluate whether that's a good investment or not, and how it impacts our overall tax burden on Minnesotans if we were to eliminate some of those tax expenditures?
Chair Marquardt.
Mr. Chair, Representative Greenman, probably the best way, I mean, there is every 2 years, the Department of Revenue puts out a tax expenditure budget where it lists the tax expenditure, gives information on it, and then also what the cost would be. So that's about it. Otherwise, it has to take initiative of a legislator to bring something forward. And one thing is that this commission will have legislators on it. 8 of the 9 are legislators. So if they agree on a bipartisan manner that, let's say this, we recommend that this cease to exist. If you've got a bipartisan of those legislators, that would carry a lot of weight, I think, into the legislature. It's not just a review board of non-legislators. It's actually legislators who would, on a bipartisan basis, be recommending something. So, but other than that, right now, there just isn't, unless an individual member kind of brings one up specifically for expiration or extension.
Representative Greenman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just, can you give me a sense of why this is important, how tax expenditures impact the overall sort of tax burden on Minnesotans?
Representative Chair Marquart.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Representative Greenman. Every time you carve out a specific tax expenditure, you're raising tax rates on others or lessening capacity to spend in other areas. So, I mean, the more you would eliminate these, if you wanted to make it revenue neutral, you would be able to lower rates. And in fact, the Department of Revenue gave a few examples of that in their report this year, that if you were to just even exempt some of those, that would be administratively easy to do, and you could lower rates. So, right, anytime you carve something out for someone else, the others are paying more or getting less.
Representative Claiborne.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is really, since Representative Greenman asked the question I was most concerned about, this will be more of a comment. I just want to thank you, Chair Marquart, for elevating this conversation. It is important to my Plymouth community, so I thank you for that. I appreciate always your commitment to fairness and transparency in the tax code and the work that you do with the Capitol. And to Representative Nash, I agree with many of the comments that he made, that we need to find a way to really have teeth in making sure that we can work together to make sure that the dollars we're spending in our state through the tax code are really creating the ripple and effect and benefit that serves our state well. So I would invite Representative Nash to work with me and you and to see what we can do in the next year to improve our tax code. But really, thank you for your work for fairness and transparency.
Thank you.
Representative Marquart, you want to, that was my last question, or do you want to wrap up and then we'll proceed to a vote?
Yep. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I think anytime you can bring more accountability and transparency into the tax code, the better we are. I appreciate your support.
And with that, members, I'll renew my motion that we refer House File 1019 to the Committee on Taxes. The legislative assistant will take the roll. You're muted, Sydney. There we go.
Chair Nelson.
Aye.
Vice Chair Carlson.
Aye.
Representative Nash.
Yes.
Representative Bonner.
Aye.
Representative Drazkowski.
Aye.
Representative Elkins.
Aye.
Representative Greenman.
Aye.
Representative Claiborne.
Aye.
Representative Koznick.
No.
Representative Mason. You're muted, Representative Mason.
Got it. Aye.
Representative Pulaski.
Pulaski, aye.
Representative Quam.
Yes.
With a vote of 11 ayes and 1 nay, the motion prevails.
And with that, Representative Marquart, you're back to your own committee. I hear that's a hard chair over there.
That's right. Mr. Chair and members, thank you so much. Appreciate that. Have a good day.